This one genealogy. 1 Chronicles 26. 1 calls the gatekeeper Meshelemia the son of Ka. 2. A Levite, the son of Imnah and the gatekeeper to the east of the temple in King Hezekiah's day. He was in charge of the voluntary offerings of the true God, to give Jehovah's contribution and the most holy things, and had other men under his control. 2 Ch 31. 14-16. Costhorn, a descendant of Judah. Cos became father to Anub and Zobeba and the families of Ahahul the son of Haram. 1 Ch 4. 1, 8. Cushai Cushmiddle.Ear, a Levite of the family of Merari and the father or ancestor of Ethan, one of the group of Levite singers and musicians of David's day. 1 Ch 15. 16, 17. Cushai is evidently called Kishi at 1 Chronicles 6. 44. Kyrios, Sea Lord. Ladoramiddle.Da, a descendant of Judah and the second named of Sheila's two sons. He is referred to as the father of Mareshah. 1 Ch 4. 21. Laban White. 1. The grandson of Abraham's brother Nahor. He was the son of Bethuel and the brother of Rebekah. Ge 24. 15, 29. 28. 5, and he was the father of Leah and Rachel. Ge 29. 16. Laban resided at the city of Haran in Padanaram, an area of Mesopotamia. Ge 24. 10. 27. 43. 28. 6. 29. 4, 5. Laban is called the son of Bethuel the Syrian, literally, the Aramean. He is also referred to as Laban the Syrian. Ge 28. 5. 25. 20. 31. 20. 24. This designation is fitting in view of the fact that he was a resident of Padanaram, which means plain flatland of Aram, Syria. Laban was a Semite dwelling in a region occupied by persons speaking Aramaic, a Semitic language. To the vicinity just mentioned, aged Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for Isaac. Ge 24. 1-4, 10. When Laban heard Rebekah's account of her encounter with Abraham's servant and saw the gifts she had been given, he went running to the servant, addressed him as one blessed by Jehovah, and extended hospitality to him. Ge 24. 28-32. Laban subsequently took a leading part in the negotiations concerning the marriage of Rebekah, the approval for the marriage coming from both him and his father, Bethuel. Ge 24. 50-61. Years later, to escape Esau's vengeance and to obtain a wife, Jacob traveled to the home of his uncle Laban at Haran. Ge 27. 41. 28. 5. By this time Laban had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Ge 29. 16, and possibly also sons. Ge 31. 1. Laban made an agreement with Jacob that for 7 years of service he would receive Laban's younger daughter Rachel as wife. However, Laban tricked Jacob on his wedding night by substituting the older daughter Leah for Rachel, brushing Jacob's protests aside by appealing to local custom and then offering Rachel Otextoi acute Miritra longo, Lobdanum 186 and color-patched sheep, the dark brown sheep among the young rams, and any color-patched and speckled she-goats. Ge 30. 31-34, but Jacob's later words to Leah and Rachel, and also to Laban. Ge 31. 4-9, 41 indicate that during succeeding years Laban frequently altered this original agreement when it turned out that Jacob's flocks were increasing greatly. Laban's attitude toward Jacob was not the same as formerly, and at Jehovah's direction Jacob decided to return to his homeland with his family and flocks. Ge 31. 1-5, 13, 17, 18. On the third day after Jacob's secret departure, Laban learned of it and pursued Jacob, catching up with him in the mountainous region of Gilead. However, a warning from God prevented Laban from harming Jacob. Ge 31. 19-24. When they met, Laban and Jacob quarreled. Jacob pointed to his 20 years of faithful service and hard work and showed how Laban had dealt with him unfairly, changing his wages 10 times. Ge 31. 36-42. Laban was very concerned about retrieving the teraphim, or household idols, which Rachel, unknown to Jacob, had stolen. These he was unable to find, for Rachel kept them concealed. Laban may have become influenced in his religious ideas by the moon-worshipping people among whom he dwelt, and this may be indicated by his use of omens and his possession of teraphim. However, it should be noted that it was likely more than merely religious reasons that made Laban so anxious to locate and retrieve the teraphim. Tablets unearthed at Nuzini Kirkuk, Iraq, reveal that, according to the laws of patriarchal times in that particular area, possession of such household idols by a woman's husband could give him the right to appear in court and claim the estate of his deceased father-in-law. Hence, Laban may have thought that Jacob himself stole the teraphim in order to dispossess Laban's own sons later. This may explain why, on failing to locate the household gods, Laban was anxious to conclude an agreement with Jacob that would ensure that Jacob would not go back with the household gods after Laban's death to deprive his sons of their inheritance. GE 31. 30-35, 41-52. Laban made a covenant of family peace with Jacob, and to memorialize it, a stone pillar and a heap of stones were set up. Using Hebrew, Jacob called the heap Gilead, meaning witness heap. Laban called it Jegar-Sahadutha, using an Aramaic, or Syrian, expression having the same meaning. It was also called the watchtower. GE 31. 43-53. After bidding his grandchildren and daughters farewell, Laban returned home, and the Bible record makes no further mention of him. GE 31. 54-55. 2. A place mentioned at Deuteronomy 1. 1 in relation to the desert plains in front of Sup. The exact location of Laban is unknown. Labdanum labdar-middle.num. A soft, black or dark brown gum that exudes from the leaves and branches of several varieties of cistus, or acros. The gum has a bitter taste but a fragrant odor. It is used in perfumes and, at one time, was also extensively employed in medicine. With reference to this substance, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus 3:112 wrote, "It is gathered from the beards of he-goats, where it is found a sticking like gum, having come from the bushes on which they browse. It is used in many sorts of unguents ointments, and is what the Arabs burn chiefly as incense." Translation by G. Rawlinson. The Hebrew word nekhoth designates this item carried by a caravan of Ishmaelites to whom Joseph was sold, and one of the fine products that Jacob told his sons to take as a gift to one who was ruler in Egypt. GE 37. 25. 43. 11. Nekhoth has been variously rendered spices kj, garmet, rs, triggerkant dar, resin mo, and, as defined by Kuhler and Baumgartner, labdanum nw. Lexicon in Veteris Testamenti Libros, Leiden, 1958, p. 615. Labor. See forced labor. Hired laborer. Labor pains. The tribulation associated with giving otex to a acute meritra longo, labor pains 187. It is true that the pain of pregnancy and childbearing may be relieved by medical treatment and may even be prevented to some extent by care and preparatory methods. But, generally, childbirth remains a physically distressing experience. GE 35. 16-20. ISA 26. 17. Symbolic use. Despite labor pains associated with childbearing, there is happiness attendant upon the birth of a child. When Jesus Christ spoke intimately with his apostles on the evening before his death, he used this circumstance as an illustration. He explained to them that he was going to leave them and then went on to say, "Most truly I say to you, you will weep and wail, but the world will rejoice. You will be grieved, but your grief will be turned into joy. A woman, when she is giving birth, has grief, because her hour has arrived. But when she has brought forth the young child, she remembers the tribulation no more because of the joy that a man has been born into the world. You also, therefore, are now, indeed, having grief. But I shall see you again and your hearts will rejoice, and your joy no one will take from you." Job 16. 20-22. This painful time did come upon them for parts of 3 days, when they doubtless wept and afflicted their souls by fasting. 5. 35. Compare PS 35. 13. But early on the morning of the third day, Nisan 16, and for 40 days after that, the resurrected Jesus appeared to certain of the disciples. Imagine their joy. On the day of Pentecost, the 50th day from Jesus' resurrection, God's Holy Spirit was poured out upon them, and they became joyful witnesses of his resurrection, first in Jerusalem and later in distant parts of the earth. Act 1. 3, 8 And no one could take their joy away. Job 16. 22. The psalmist described a gathering of kings as they viewed the splendor and magnificence of God's holy city Zion, with its towers and ramparts of strength. He says, they themselves saw, and so they were amazed. They got disturbed, they were sent running in panic. Trembling itself took hold of them there, birth pangs like those of a woman giving birth. PS 48. 1-6 The psalm apparently describes an actual occurrence in which enemy kings were panic-stricken in a projected attack on Jerusalem. Jeremiah, in prophesying defeat to come upon mighty Babylon, told of a people from the north, the report about whom would cause the king of Babylon to have severe pains, like a woman giving birth. It was fulfilled when Cyrus came against Babylon, and particularly when the mysterious handwriting appeared on the wall at Babylonian king Belshazzar's feast. This the prophet Daniel interpreted to Belshazzar as portending the immediate fall of Babylon to the Medes and Persians. J 50. 41-43. Da 5. 5, 6, 28. Concerning the coming of Jehovah's day, the Apostle Paul explained that it would be when the cry of peace and security is being proclaimed. Then sudden destruction is to be instantly upon them, just as the pang of distress upon a pregnant woman. And they will by no means escape. 1th 5. 2, 3 Labor pains come suddenly, the exact day and hour not being foreknown. The pains first are about 15 to 20 minutes apart, becoming closer together as labor advances. In most cases the time of labor is relatively short, especially in its second stage, but once labor pains begin, the woman knows that a birth is approaching and that the ordeal must be undergone. There is no escape. In the Apostle John's vision in Revelation he saw a heavenly woman crying out in her pains and in her agony to give birth. The child born was a son, a male, who is to shepherd all the nations with an iron rod. In spite of the dragon's efforts to devour it, her child was caught away to God and to his throne. Read 12. 1, 2, 4-6 The son's being caught away by God would denote God's acceptance of the child as his own, even as it was customary in ancient times to present a newborn child before its father for o textoi acute miritra longo. Lachish 188 With the coming of Jehovah's day. Now as for the times and the seasons, brothers, you need nothing to be written to you. You, brothers, you are not in darkness, so that that day should overtake you as it would thieves. 1th 5. 1, 4. Lachish, a Judean city in the Shephelah. Jos 15. 21, 33, 39 Lachish is identified with Tel Egdawir Tel Lachish, a mount surrounded by valleys, and lying some 24 kilometers 15 MW of Hebron. Anciently this site occupied a strategic position on the principal road linking Jerusalem with Egypt. At one time the city covered an area of about 8 hectares, 20 acres and perhaps had a population numbering between 6,000 and 7,500 persons. At the time of Israel's conquest of Canaan, Jephthah the king of Lachish joined 4 other kings in a military offensive against Gibeon, a city that had made peace with Joshua. Jos 10. 1-5 In response to Gibeon's appeal for aid, the Israelite army staged an all-night march from Gilgal. With Jehovah's help, they defeated the Canaanite alliance, trapped the kings themselves in a cave, and thereafter executed them. Jos 10. 6-27. 12. 11 Later, the city of Lachish was taken in less than 2 days of fighting, and its inhabitants were slain. Also, Horam the king of Gezer, who came to the aid of Lachish, suffered defeat. Jos 10. 31-35. Some archaeologists link Israel's campaign against Lachish with a thick layer of ash uncovered at Tel Egdawir, in which, among other things, a scarab of Ramses was found. But the Bible does not state that the city was burned, as it does in the case of Jericho Joes 6. 24, 25, I Joes 8. 28, and Hazor Joes 11. 11. Rather, Joshua 11. 13 seems to indicate that the Israelites rarely burned a city standing on their own mounds. So there is no scriptural basis for placing the destruction causing the ash layer in the time of Joshua and then dating the Israelite conquest of Canaan accordingly. It is also noteworthy that the Ramses to whom the scarab should be assigned cannot be definitely ascertained. At least one archaeologist attributed the scarab to Ramses III and advanced the thought that Lachish was destroyed by the Philistines in the 12th century BCE during Hoboam's reign 997-981 BCE. Lachish was strengthened militarily. 2 ch. 11. 5-12 later, in about 830 BCE, King Amaziah fled to Lachish to escape conspirators, but was pursued and put to death there. 2 Chi 14. 19. 2 ch. 25. 27. Besieged by Sennacherib. Lachish was besieged by Assyrian king Sennacherib in 732 BCE. From there he sent Rabshakeh, Tartan, and Rabsaris with a heavy military force to Jerusalem in an effort to move King Hezekiah to surrender. Through his chief spokesman Rabshakeh, Sennacherib defied Jehovah and later sent messengers to Jerusalem with letters of continued taunt and threat designed to bring about Hezekiah's surrender. This defiance of Jehovah God finally led to the annihilation by God's angel of 185,000 Assyrian warriors in one night. 2 Chi 18. 14, 17-35. 19. 8-13, 32-35. Issa 36. 1-20. 37. 8-13, 33-36. A portrayal of the siege of Lachish, from Sennacherib's palace at Nineveh, indicates that the city was encompassed by a double wall having towers at regular intervals and that palms, grapes, and figs flourished in the surrounding hilly area. The scene showing Sennacherib receiving the spoils of Lachish is accompanied by the following inscription. Sennacherib, king of the world, king of Assyria, sat upon an imdu throne and passed in review the booty taken from Lachish like Hisu. Ancient Near Eastern Texts, edited by J. B. Pritchard, 1974, p. 288. Captured by Babylonians. When the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar overran Judah 609-607 BCE, Lachish and Azekah were the last two fortified cities to fall before Jerusalem was taken. J. 34. 6, 7 What are known as the Lachish letters written on pottery fragments, 18 of which were found at Tel Ed-Dawir in 1935 and 3 more in 1938 appear to Otextoi Acute Muritra Longo. Lake of Fire 189 Idolatry introduced in Jerusalem originated at Lachish. Or, the sin possibly involved Judah's reliance on horses and chariots, which may have been received at Lachish from Egypt. Ladan Ladan. 1. An Ephraimite ancestor of Joshua. 1 ch. 7. 22, 26, 27. 2. A Gershonite Levite from whom several paternal houses originated. 1 ch. 23. 7-9. 26. 21 He evidently was also called Libni. X6. 17. Ladder. The only biblical reference to a ladder is at Genesis 28. 12, where the Hebrew term sul middle.lam applies to a ladder Jacob beheld in a dream. The patriarch saw a ladder, or perhaps what looked like a rising flight of stones stationed upon the earth, with its top reaching up to the heavens. God's angels were ascending and descending on the ladder, and the representation of Jehovah God was above it. GE 28. 13th This ladder with the angels upon it indicates the existence of communication between earth and heaven, and that angels minister in an important way between God and those having his approval. When Jesus said to his disciples, "Most truly I say to you men, you will see heaven opened up and the angels of God ascending and descending to the Son of Man," he may have had in mind Jacob's vision. Job 1. 51. Scaling ladders were part of siege equipment used during warfare and are frequently depicted on Egyptian and Assyrian monuments. A relief from Nineveh shows the Assyrians employing siege ladders when assaulting Lachish. Ladders served other purposes in ancient times, as in the building trades. For instance, They are shown on the ornamu stele depicting the construction of a ziggurat. Also, in an Assyrian relief from Tel Halaf, considered to be of the 9th century BCE, a man is shown climbing a date palm tree by means of a ladder. Lady. Sea Queen. Lael belonging to God. Elvitan, the father of Eliasaph, the chieftain of the paternal house for the Gershonites during Israel's trek in the wilderness. U3. 24. Lahad. The descendant of Judah and the second named of Jatath's two sons. 1 ch 4. 1, 2. Lamam. A Judean city in the Shephelah. Jos 15. 20, 33, 40. It is usually identified with Kabad el-Lam Horvat Lihem, about 5 kilometers 3 mi of Lachish. Lami my bread. The brother of Goliath the Gittite. The account at 1 Chronicles 20. 5 reads, in part, Elhanan the son of Jeg got to strike down Lami the brother of Goliath the Gittite, during a war with the Philistines. However, in a parallel text at 2 Samuel 21. 19 the reading is, Elhanan the son of Yair the Bethlehemite got to strike down Goliath the Gittite. In the latter text it appears that eth-me in English, Lami, the Hebrew term eth merely denoting that Lami is the object of a verb, was misread by a copyist to be Beit-Thal-me Bethlehemite. Therefore the original probably read, got to strike down Lami, just as the parallel text at 1 Chronicles 20. 5 reads. This would make the two texts harmonize on this point. Lami, then, was evidently the brother of the Goliath that David killed. On the other hand, it is possible that there were two Goliaths. See Goliath. Lishlion. 1. A man from Galim, the father of Paul to Paltiel, to whom Saul gave as a wife his daughter Michal, previously the wife of David. 1 Sa 25. 44. 2 Sa 3. 15. 2. A northern Canaanite city destroyed by the Danites, who thereafter rebuilt it and gave it the name of Dan JG 18. 27-29. Also called Leshem. Jos 19. 47. See Dan No. 3. Lays Halarai Shalion. A town in the territory of Benjamin identified by F-Enable Geography de la Palestine, Paris, 1938, Volume 2, p. 368 with Izawiya, about 2.5 kilometers 1.5 mi of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Isaiah's prophetic foreview of the rampaging Assyrian, as he advances village by village, calls on Leizha to pay attention to the coming attack. Issa 10. 30. Lake of Fire. This expression occurs only o text to a acute muritra longo. Lakem 190 has inherited from Adam Row 5. 12, nor does it refer to Hades Sheol. It must, therefore, be symbolic of another kind of death, one that is without reversal, for the record nowhere speaks of the lake as giving up those in it, as do Adamic death and Hades Sheol. Re 20. 13 Thus, those not found written in the Book of Life, unrepentant opposers of God's sovereignty, are hurled into the lake of fire, meaning eternal destruction, or the second death. Re 20. 15. While the foregoing texts make evident the symbolic quality of the lake of fire, it has been used by some persons to support belief in a literal place of fire and torment. Revelation 20. 10 has been appealed to, because it speaks of the devil, the wild beast, and the false prophet as being tormented day and night forever and ever in the lake of fire. However, this cannot refer to actual conscious torment. Those thrown into the lake of fire undergo the second death. Re 20. 14 In death there is no consciousness and, hence, no feeling of pain or suffering. EC 9. 5. In the scriptures fiery torment is associated with destruction and death. For example, in the Greek Septuagint translation of the Hebrew scriptures the word for torment numbers is several times used with reference to punishment by death. As 3. 20. 32. 24, 30 Similarly, concerning Babylon the Great, the Book of Revelation says, the kings of the earth will weep and beat themselves in grief over her, when they look at the smoke from the burning of her, while they stand at a distance, because of their fear of her torment. Gr. Ba middle dot sa middle dot ni middle dot smau. Re 18. 9, 10. As to the meaning of the torment, an angel later explains. Thus with a swift pitch will Babylon the great city be hurled down, and she will never be found again. Re 18. 21. So, fiery torment here is parallel with destruction, and in the case of Babylon the Great, it is everlasting destruction. Compare E 17. 16. 18. 8, 15-17, 19. Therefore, those who are tormented forever from Gr. Ba middle dot sa middle dot nizo in the lake of fire undergo second death from which there is no resurrection. The related Greek word ba middle dot sa middle dot ni middle dot stes is translated jailer in Matthew 18. 34. Rs. Nw. ed. Compare verses 30. Thus those hurled into the lake of fire will be held under restraint, or jailed, in death throughout eternity. See Gehenna. Torment. Lakum Lakum. A boundary site of Naphtali. Jos 19. 32, 33. It is possibly but Cush Shihorvat Cush, by the Jordan River just east of the Sea of Galilee. Lamb. See sheep. Lame, lameness. A physical handicap that prevents a person from walking normally. Lameness may date from birth, because of congenital deformities. Act 3. 2. 14. 8, but most cases are caused by accidents or diseases. Aaronic priesthood. A lame person who was a descendant of Aaron could not serve in the priesthood, although he was allowed to eat from the things provided for the priesthood for their sustenance. La 21. 16-23. Jehovah set a high standard of physical fitness for his priesthood, for these represented him at his sanctuary. So, too, Christ, the great high priest, was loyal, guileless, undefiled, separated from the sinners. Job 7. 26. Sacrifices. It was also forbidden, under the law, to offer as a sacrifice any animal with a defect of lameness, because these foreshadowed the perfect sacrifice of Christ. La 15. 21. La 22. 19, 20. This law was violated by the apostate Israelites, for which God reproved them, saying, when you present a lame animal for sacrificing, you say, it is nothing bad. Bring it near, please, to your governor. Will he find pleasure in you, or will he receive you kindly? Can I take pleasure in it at your hand? L1. 8, 13. The apostle evidently applies this requirement in a spiritual way to Christians, entreating them. Present your bodies as sacrifice living, holy, acceptable to God, a sacred service with your power of reason. Row 12. 1. Jacob's O textoi acute muritra longo, lame, lameness 191. You will not come in here, but the blind and the lame ones will certainly turn you away, they thinking. David will not come in here. They may have actually placed such persons on the wall as defenders, as is stated by Josephus Jewish Antiquities, 7, 61-3, 1, and this may be the reason why David said, anyone striking the Jebusites, let him, by means of the water tunnel, make contact with both the lame and the blind, hateful to the soul of David. These lame and blind ones were the symbol of the Jebusites' insult to David and, more seriously, their taunt against the armies of Jehovah. David hated the Jebusites, along with their lame and blind, for such arrogance. He may actually have been calling the Jebusite leaders themselves the lame and blind, in derision. 2 Sir 5. 6-8. As to the statement in verse 8, that is why they say, the blind one and the lame one will not come into the house. Several explanations have been offered. In the text this statement is not attributed to David and may mean that others developed this proverbial saying with regard to those who, like the Jebusites, boasted or were overconfident of their secure position. Or, the saying might have meant, no one who holds intercourse with disagreeable people like the Jebusites will enter. Others would render the text, because the blind and the lame continued to say, he shall not come into this house, or, because they had said, even the blind and the lame, he shall not come into the house. Barrett's synopsis of criticisms, London, 1847, Volume 2, Part 2, p. 518. KJ margin. On a later occasion, Elijah asked the Israelites, "How long will you be limping upon two different opinions? If Jehovah is the true God, go following him. But if Baal is, go following him." At that time the Israelites were claiming to worship Jehovah, but at the same time were worshipping Baal. Their course was unsteady and halting, like that of a lame man. During the contest that ensued, when the prophets of Baal were vainly trying from morning till noon to get their God to answer them, they kept limping around the altar that they had made. This may be a mocking description of the ritualistic dance or hobble of the fanatical Baal worshippers, or it may be that they limp because of their tiredness from the long, futile ritual. 1 Kai 18. 21-29. Limping, lameness, and stumbling are used in figures of speech to denote halting irregularity or unsteadiness in one's course of life, purpose, or speech. Bildad, supposedly warning Job of dangers ahead for him, said of a person taking a wicked course, "Disaster stands ready to make him limp." Job 18. 12. In a similar figure David and Jeremiah spoke of their enemies as waiting for them to make an unsteady step, watching for them to limp, so that, as Jeremiah's foes said, we may prevail against him and take our revenge upon him. Job 20. 10. PS 38. 16, 17. The enemies of Jesus Christ wanted to see him stumble, or limp, in his speech so as to entrap him. Mount 22. 15. Proverbial usage. As one that is mutilating his feet which would make him lame, as one that is drinking mere violence, is he that is thrusting matters into the hand of someone stupid, said wise King Solomon. Truly, the man employing a stupid person to handle any project for him is doing crippling violence to his own interests. He is certain to see his proposed work collapse, with damage to himself. PR 26. 6. The Proverbs continue with a like illustration. Have the legs of the lame one drawn up water? Then there is a proverb in the mouth of stupid people. PR 26. 7. In ancient times, especially in cities built upon mounds, it was often necessary to climb down a ladder or a long stairway to bring water up from the well. A stupid person trying to speak or apply a proverb is as clumsy and ineffective as a lame man trying to carry water up a stairway. God's ancient nation. In speaking of the restoration o textoi acute miritra longo, Lamech 192 spiritually immature ones, who should be making better progress. Heb 5. 12-14. Then, after speaking of discipline, he said, "Keep making straight paths for your feet, that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather that it may be healed." Heb 12. 13. Even stronger ones should carefully watch how they walk in their Christian course, so that the weaker, spiritually lame ones would not stumble or injure themselves. If those stronger in faith used their spiritual freedom to do certain things that were lawful, those weaker in faith might be stumbled by their actions. Row 15. 1. The Apostle Paul sets forth as an example of this principle the matter of eating and drinking. Row 14. 13-18, 21. In this passage he counsels, in part, make this your decision, not to put before a brother a stumbling block or a cause for tripping. He says, it is well not to eat flesh or to drink wine or do anything over which your brother stumbles. Compare 1 Co 8. 7-13. On the other hand, the Apostle shows, a Christian should strengthen his own spiritual legs so that he will not limp or be stumbled by what occurs or by what someone else does. He should make himself strong so as to keep steady in the Christian course. Paul says, let the one eating not look down on the one not eating, and let the one not eating not judge the one eating, for God has welcomed that one. Row 14. 3. This principle was expressed by the psalmist. Abundant peace belongs to those loving your law, and for them there is no stumbling block. PS 119. 165. Those loving God's law will not be caused to limp with spiritual lameness over any matter. Complete healing. Lameness has caused many tears. Just as Jesus Christ healed many lame and maimed persons when he was on earth, even restoring dried up body parts. Mr. 3. 1, 5. Compare Luke 22. 50, 51, by means of a new heaven God's Son will again perform similar cures. This he will accomplish completely as high priest and king appointed by God, wiping out every tear from the eyes of humankind. Mount 8. 16, 17. Re 21. 1, 4. Lamech. 1. The son of Methuselah and a descendant of Cain. Ge 4. 17, 18. His lifetime and Adam's overlapped. Lamech had 2 wives, Ada and Zillah, at the same time and was the first polygamist of Bible record. Ge 4. 19. By Ada he had sons named Jubal, the founder of those who dwell in tents and have livestock, and Jubal, the founder of all those who handled the harp and the pipe. Ge 4. 20, 21. By Zillah, Lamech became the father of Tubal-Cain, the forger of every sort of tool of copper and iron, and a daughter named Naamah. Ge 4. 22. The poem that Lamech composed for his wives. Ge 4. 23, 24 reflects the violent spirit of that day. Lamech's poem run. Hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Give ear to my saying. A man I have killed for wounding me, yes, a young man for giving me a blow. If 7 times Cain is to be avenged, then Lamech 70 times and 7. Evidently Lamech was presenting a case of self-defense, pleading that his act was not one of deliberate murder, like that of Cain. Lamech claimed that, in defending himself, he had killed a man who struck and wounded him. Therefore, his poem stood as a plea for immunity against anyone desiring to get revenge against him for killing his attacker. It appears that none of Cain's descendants, which would include Lamech's offspring, survived the flood. 2. The descendant of Seth, son of Methuselah and father of Noah. Ge 5. 25, 28, 29. 1 ch 1. 1-4. The lifetimes of this Lamech and Adam likewise overlapped. Lamech had faith in God, and after calling his son's name Noah, probably meaning rest, consolation, he uttered the words, "This one will bring us comfort from our work and from the pain of our hands resulting from the ground which Jehovah has cursed." Ge 5. 29. These words found fulfillment when the curse on the ground was lifted during Noah's lifetime. Ge 8. 21. Lamech had other sons. O text to acute miritra longo. Lamentations, book of 193, and shows that Jehovah is good to the one hoping in him. Or 3. 22, 25. Name. In the Hebrew this book is named by the opening word a middle ka, which means how. The Septuagint translators called the book Throdashnoi, meaning dirges, laments. In the Babylonian Talmud Bava Batra 14b it is identified by the term chi middle note, meaning dirges, elegies, and it is called Lamentations Latin by Jerome. The English name Lamentations comes from this latter title. Place in the Bible canon. In the Hebrew canon the Book of Lamentations is usually counted in among the 5 Megil middle lot rolls, consisting of the Song of Solomon, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. However, in ancient copies of the Hebrew scriptures the Book of Lamentations is said to have followed the Book of Jeremiah, as it does in English Bibles of today. Writer. In the Greek Septuagint this book is introduced with the words, "And it occurred that, after Israel had been taken captive and Jerusalem had been desolated, Jeremiah sat down weeping and lamented with this lamentation over Jerusalem and said." The Targums also identify Jeremiah as the writer, introducing it as follows. Jeremiah the prophet and great priest said. The introduction in the Clementine recension of the Latin Vulgate is, "And it occurred that, after Israel had been led away into captivity and Jerusalem was deserted, Jeremiah the prophet sat weeping and wailed with this lamentation over Jerusalem. And sighing with a bitter spirit, and moaning woefully, he said." Style. The 5 chapters of the Book of Lamentations consist of 5 poems, the first 4 of which are acrostics. The Hebrew alphabet has 22 distinct letters consonants, and in each of the first 4 chapters of Lamentations successive verses begin with different ones of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Chapters 1, 2, and 4 each have 22 verses arranged alphabetically according to the Hebrew alphabet, verse 1 beginning with the first Hebrew letter Aleph, verse 2 commencing with the second letter, Beit, and so forth. to the end of the alphabet. Chapter 3 has 66 verses, and in it 3 successive verses begin with the same Hebrew letter before passing on to the next letter. In chapters 2, 3, and 4 there is a reversal of the letters E and PE. There they are not in the same order as in Lamentations 1 and PS 119. But this does not mean that the inspired writer of Lamentations made a mistake. It has been observed in a consideration of this matter. Still less does the irregularity in question permit of being attributed to an oversight on the part of the composer. For the irregularity is repeated in 3 poems. It is rather connected with another circumstance. For we find in other alphabetic poems also, especially the older ones, many deviations from the rule, which undeniably prove that the composers bound themselves rigorously by the order of the alphabet only so long as it fitted into 5 poems lamenting the tragedy that befell Jerusalem and its inhabitants in 607 BCE at the hands of the Babylonians, written by Jeremiah immediately after the destruction of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is personified as a widow bereaved of her children, with no one to give comfort. 1-22 She acknowledges that her sin against Jehovah is the reason for her distress. She prays for the Almighty to punish those who rejoice over her suffering. Jehovah has acted in anger against Jerusalem too. 1-22 He has thrown Jerusalem down from heaven to earth. He has spurned his sanctuary and shown no respect for king and priest. As a result, passers-by are amazed at what has happened to the city that was the perfection of prettiness. The able-bodied man, representing the nation, speaks of his affliction, yet expresses hope. 1-66 He describes his present desperate situation. Nevertheless, he is confident that Jehovah textoi acute miritra longo. Lamp 194 The course of thought without any artificiality. Commentary on the Old Testament, by C. F. Keel and F. Delitzsch, 1973, Volume 8, The Lamentations of Jeremiah, p. 338. Among examples then cited are Psalm 34, where the war verse is lacking, and Psalm 145, which omits the nun verse. The fact that strict adherence to the alphabetic arrangement of Hebrew letters is not present in these inspired writings should cause no concern. While the use of acrostics undoubtedly served as a memory aid, the message was of primary importance, and thought content took precedence over any literary device. Lamentations chapter 5 is not an acrostic poem, though it does contain 22 verses, the same number as the distinct letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Time of composition. The vividness of Lamentations shows that the book was written shortly after Jerusalem's fall in 607 BCE, while the events of the Babylonian siege and burning of Jerusalem were still fresh in the mind of Jeremiah. There is general agreement that the Book of Lamentations was penned soon after Jerusalem's fall, and it is reasonable to conclude that the writing of it was completed in 607 BCE. Fulfillment of prophecy. Fulfilled in Jerusalem's experiences vividly portrayed in the Book of Lamentations were the words of Deuteronomy 28. 63-65. The fulfillment of various other divine prophecies and warnings is also shown in this book. For example, compare Lamentations 1. 2 with Jeremiah 30. 14. Lamentations 2. 17 with Leviticus 26. 17. Lamentations 2. 20 with Deuteronomy 28. 53. Contents. In the first chapter, beginning with verse 12, Jeremiah personifies Jerusalem, God's covenant woman Zion, as speaking. Issa 62. 1-6 She is now desolate, as though widowed and bereft of her children, a captive woman put into forced labor as a slave. In chapter 2, Jeremiah himself speaks. In chapter 3, Jeremiah pours out his feelings, transferring them to the figure of the nation as an able-bodied man. In chapter 4, Jeremiah continues his lament. In the 5th chapter, the inhabitants of Jerusalem are pictured as speaking. The expressions of acknowledgement of sin, the hope and confidence in Jehovah, and the desire to turn to the right way, as portrayed throughout, were not the actual feelings of the majority of the people. However, there was a remnant like Jeremiah. So the view expressed in the Book of Lamentations is a true evaluation of Jerusalem's situation as God saw it. The Book of Lamentations is therefore a true and valuable record, inspired by God. Lamp. A vessel used to produce artificial light. It has a wick for burning flammable liquids such as oil, the wick drawing up the fluid by capillary attraction to feed the flame. Wicks were made of flax. Issa 42. 3. 43. 17. Peeled rush, or hemp. Olive oil was the fluid generally burned in ancient lamps. X 27. 20. The oil